Well, thank you so much for tuning in. You're listening to WSLR LP 96.5 FM, Sarasota, Bradenton. And I'm your host, DJ Nomad on SynthWorld. And I am very pleased to be joined here by Vaporwave, MIDI wave artist, Pete, aka FM Skyline. Pete, thanks for being here.
Hey, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Excited to dive in. And so I want to just go ahead and start off for our listeners, just getting a little bit of background about you before we get into your actual music. So first off, just to kind of pinpoint you on the map somewhere, where are you located and where are you from?
I'm in Richmond, Virginia, and I grew up in the Philadelphia area. I grew up in New Jersey, right outside of Philly. But I've been down here for a while, 13 or 14 years.
Awesome. Okay. So let's dive into your music as well. I want to know how you kind of just got into music, generally speaking, starting out, and then how did you kind of stumble upon, the subgenres of music that I kind of play on my show and that you produce as well?
Well, I've been making music for a long time, since I was a little kid. My dad played guitar and folk music and stuff, so I've been playing around with instruments since I was a little kid. And then in high school, I played guitar. I kind of did the whole like grunge to new metal to metalcore.
Sure. Oh, I know it. Yeah.
Pipeline. And then after high school, I kind of went off. I got really into piano. I taught myself piano, and I've even been to college for that. I went to college once for jazz and once for classical. I kind of left both times because I got a rock and roll itch again. I always wind up coming back to making like creative music. I like learning that stuff. It's been fun, but I've always gravitated back towards more creative music making. So that's sort of the history of me in a broad stroke. I was doing some songwriting and stuff for a while here in Richmond, and I played in a lot of bands. I've played in tons of bands throughout my life on guitar, bass. I even played drums for a little surf rock trio at one point. But I was doing some songwriting for a while, and my dream for a while has been, since I moved down here, has to just been like a composer and an artist of some sort. So I figured it out in a kind of weird way. That's what I get to do with FM Skyline now. So it's been a very weird trajectory, but it feels like it all makes sense now. But it definitely did not at many stops along the way.
Oh gosh, I feel like that's true of so many things in life, right? It doesn't make sense until you kind of get there.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy.
Yeah, wow. Okay. And honestly, you might have the most expansive music background of all the people I've interviewed so far. So that's pretty impressive. So how though, like this music specifically though, can you think of like artists or movies or, I know some of like what influences your music, but what can you think of details that we can fill in there?
That's right. I'm sorry I missed that question because, I became, fascinated. I started hearing about Vaporwave when it was getting written about, I guess, back then. And it was sort of like a little bit of like a standoffish interest I had. I was like, this seems really artsy fartsy or something. But it just started to capture my imagination. And then I guess around 2016, I sort of just like fell in love with it really fast. I was really into Esprit and surfing and eyeliner and Macintosh Plush and Chuck Person's Echo Jams. I just sort of I fell in love really fast with a lot of stuff, and I didn't even really I didn't swim through a lot of music. I just started like writing, and that's when I made my first album, Deluxe Memory Suite. I just had a lot of inspiration, and I just kind of everything just kind of clicked at once. I was like, I know exactly what these people are doing. I know exactly what these ideas are. It just all kind of clicked. So.
After detailing his Vaporwave influences and roots, I asked him about MIDI wave, a term he has coined to describe his particular style.
Yeah, MIDI wave is a term that I've been trying to champion for a little while. I guess it's, to somebody who had no idea, it's like about a certain types of sounds, and it's about how the music is written. So it's like the types of sounds are like something you might hear on a PlayStation 1 or a Nintendo 64, or your parents' old Windows XP computer, or like one of those cheap Yamaha keyboards you get from Walmart. It's a certain type of sound. It's a digital sound that is sampled and has a certain quality to it. And then the other side, MIDI, just means that I'm making it on my computer. So it's very conspicuously digital music. It's all written on a computer. It sounds like computery. And I guess that's a distinction versus synthwave, which I think tends to be more centric on analog gear, older analog gear.
Yep.
And speak on, and synthwave, I've definitely, it's been, I never got as interested in that vein. There's definitely been things that I've liked a lot, and I'm totally comfortable with. It makes sense to call my music synthwave too, because there are synthesizers all over it, so that's fair.
Yeah.
But I feel like there are certain musical things that are different. In synthwave, there's a lot of four on the floor, and it's almost a more like there's almost a more. It's almost more minimal than what I do, I think, because I tend to incorporate a lot of melody, whereas I think in straight ahead synthwave, I think a lot more about the texture and just the layering and everything. I mean, I do a lot of that, but for me, it's a little bit more like that stuff is the stage for a melody, for a character to sing on. And I think it's because of those differences that I've never been on like electronic gyms or things like that, right? It's a wide terrain, and there's a sort of what I loved about Vaporwave, there's sort of at least I think there should be, sometimes it doesn't seem that way, but a really openness of form. You can sort of package many different kinds of things, and you can present the music in a lot of different ways in that sort of framework. And that's always been really inspiring and fun to me, that part.
How did you come up with the moniker?
It's funny because it's like I was saying how I got started on that first album. I wasn't thinking very deeply or much about anything. I was just kind of going. So, sometimes it seems like I could have come up with something a little more clever, but I still like it. It's really just this idea of like almost like a synesthetic idea. I was thinking about the idea of looking at a Skyline and hearing the sounds of like an FM synthesizer musically describing, the Skyline, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Sort of like an impressionistic sort of thing. Just the idea of just that basic idea of a sound that goes with the visual is sort of implanted in that basic idea.
Now, so speaking of which, I want to dive even a little.
After laying the groundwork for his background, FM Skyline describes his composition process and his desire to make the sounds of his generation by deriving soul from the artificial.
I think it's just sort of being like a sound of my generation,
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's like a lot of my approach to composing that way is like it's just really just trying to legitimize the sound as much as it is nostalgic. I mean, it isn't then also like like if I pick up like a Stratocaster, it's like, well, I guess that's nostalgic of the 50s or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's also it's just a sound that's used to evoke certain things. So I sort of think about it that way. I mean, obviously it has to do with nostalgia because it's something, it sounds from when I was younger, but I also just sort of think of it as like a sound of my generation in some way, and I like to write music. Like I like that these sounds, the MIDI sounds especially they have a really artificial quality to them. And I like trying to defy that. I like trying to write my music to be as emotional and expressive as possible. Music can be really soulful and meaningful in an emotional way, even when it's like super artificial, right? I love the sort of tension between these cheap sounds that are associated with commercial background use and stuff like that, and really trying to get something soulful and meaningful out of them. I really love doing that.
Oh, definitely. And I mean, kind of as a contrast to like synthwave, for example, which is trying to like harken back to some degree to a music that was popular. the music that you're talking about was always kind of in the shadows and the corners of the psyche, if you will, right? So that
Yeah.
exploration, as you talk about, really didn't happen even in like the 90s. So
It's a challenge too, because I think a lot of people who are not acquainted or ready, or they have a negative preconception about what the kind of music I make. I think they might hear the music and then be like, oh, it's like they're using that crappy ironic junk, if they never make it into like the middle of the song where there's a melody and everything, it's like, it's kind of a dangerous gambit for that reason in some ways, because people could just be repelled by the surface of it. But if they, if they get into the meat of the song, they'll realize that I'm saying a lot musically and emotionally in there.
Totally. And I think this last album actually kind of leads me into talking about your next album.
After discussing his motivations for producing, we move on to his newest album release, Images, and how he continues to evolve his sound moving forward.
I want to get your feel for the album in general, and then what are your, how do you feel right now, a few weeks out, or maybe like a week out from your release?
Yeah, almost a week.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really happy that that's your impression of it, because that's totally the project here, is to communicate emotional and musical substance now. I'm not even thinking about what, I'm thinking way less about just kind of what kind of novelty I can bring with the sound. I'm trying to, I was trying to update the sound from the last album, from Illuminations. I was trying to push it forward to make everything sound better. And I was trying to find sounds that were exciting to me, so I sort of landed on this kind of open 90s sort of sound digitally, but I was really focused on the emotional thing. And this is the first album that has taken me a couple of years. I really took my time, even though I've been writing lots of stuff. There's lots of tracks that aren't on the album, but I can connect every track on this album with moment where I found an idea and I got it going, and I'm like in here flipping out and headbanging and like, feeling really emotional. So I was really looking for those big emotional tracks on this one. But I've also noticed an interesting phenomenon more recently with my music, where sometimes people will say that my music reminds them of 80s. Sometimes people will say it reminds them of the 90s. I've even had people start to say it reminds them of the early 2000s. And that's really interesting to me. I like that a lot, because something I'm also very interested in my music is like taking different pieces of different things and putting them together.
It's a hallmark of Vaporwave, right?
Yeah, further than, it would be like, I like to take, the beat will be from an R&B song somewhere, and then the patch is coming from like, a Final Fantasy game, and like in motion pictures, there's a vocal sample in there. It's my voice. It's like there's like a chant in there.
That's you, yeah. Okay, that's what I'm talking about. Reminding me of Cranberries.
I'm ripping off Bruce Springsteen in his song "Streets of Philadelphia."
Okay.
So everything is, but if you listen to the texture of that song, it almost sounds more like an 80s, synthwavy kind of thing, so things are coming from different places. So I like to take disparate pieces like that and put them together so that you really get something new, and then you really get something that's kind of hard to just put right in a place and time.
And that's one of the coolest things about this subgenre in general. But yeah, that's it really, more than anything, I think it shows probably that your appeal to like maybe even like multiple generations of people, right? That this one reminds them of their child in the 80s, and this person reminds them in early 2000s, right? Like you've got good reach, and it does actually bring me to your appeal on some level in my next question, because I took a look earlier today that you do have a performance coming up in I believe at the beginning of June. So God, especially with your music, Vaporwave kind of generally, but with your music, there's such a great opportunity to meld together your music with like visuals. So I was wondering, do you have interest in or plans to try and tour more, play more concerts?
Yeah, I need to set some stuff up. I got really tunnel visioned out on, because I made a ton of merch and everything for this album, and I've been running a subscription on Bandcamp, so I got a little tunnel vision. But yeah, I always like to go play. So yeah, I'm hoping to set some stuff up this summer. I do have that thing June 1st in Richmond, the I2K festival that some folks are throwing here. And yeah, I'm gonna go play. I'm at least gonna go. I need to go play LA and Chicago and go up to New York, and then see if I can go to a few other places just to just to link up with people and let people see me play a bunch of tracks from the album. Because I do like to play a lot. I used to play a lot of music live, and I do like performing.
So I will definitely.
To wrap up the interview, FM Skyline elaborates further on his plans for the rest of 2024 and how to find more of his music.
The next question here really is the most logical step, which is, okay, beyond concerts, you just released an album. We've got the whole rest of the year really ahead of us, though. What can we expect from FF Skyline for the rest of the year?
Well, later in the year, I have a collab album coming out with my dear friend Equip, who is a label mate of mine and one of my best friends. So we finished an album together last year. I was flying out to Chicago a couple times a year, and I would just bring my keyboard and we would just sit there and write stuff. So we've got an album that we're gonna put out later this year. It's called Music 2. We have sort of soft announced it elsewhere. It's called Music 2. So that'll be coming. If you liked music, you'll love Music 2. So that'll be coming later this year. And then yeah, I'm probably gonna I want to sit down and make another video or two for Images. And I'm also just gonna get back to writing a lot. So I want to start.
You've got a lot of tracks hidden in the vault there, huh?
Yeah, my subscribers, I have a subscription on Bandcamp, and they have heard a lot of stuff that nobody else has had. But I want to write a lot more too this summer.
Definitely. Wow. So it sounds like we're going to be getting a lot of more music from you this year. That's awesome. Lots of big stuff coming here. We will check out Equip for sure. And so, really more than anything, we're running out of time here. I want to know, or listeners want to know, where can they find your music, find your stuff online, where can they get more FM Skyline?
You can stream it anywhere. I've got tons of really cool stuff that I made. I've got some really badass shirts, and there's a record and a CD and a cassette, and there's a coffee mug at 100%electronica.com. Put some of that stuff on my Bandcamp. I know some people like to keep their collections on Bandcamp, so my stuff's on Bandcamp. Yeah, or you can stream it anywhere. Also link to my subscription at my Bandcamp.
Yeah, perfect. And do you have any, final parting words for our listeners or SynthWorld, travelers with us?
Oh, I don't know. Thanks for tuning in.
Well, then again, thank you so much for being here. It was great chatting with you. FM Skyline, aka Pete, Virginia-based Vaporwave MIDI artist. Thank you so much, man. Take care.
Thanks for having me.